Hello, everyone, and welcome to this super pleasant episode of the Furidashi podcast, in which we will not be discussing anything upsetting or triggering or content warning, because we're just a nice, chill, happy podcast in which only happy things happen.
No! Not chill, not happy, much rage. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Furidashi podcast. I am your host, Lauren Ash, here to tell you all of the gritty, the shitty, the dirty details of everything that has been this game of Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes. It's a 5.
Yeah, it's Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes.
But zeros.
For some reason.
It's because I kept reading Ground Zero as like 5, and instead of the S, it was the 5, like in leet speak. And I don't know why.
Oh, okay. So I see what you're saying.
So it's Ground Zero 5.
So then technically it's Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes.
Yes, Ground Zeroes. Anyway, everyone, yes, welcome to this podcast. The first half or more-ish of this podcast is going to be talking about this game in as a critical manner as we can, talking about the story that we didn't actually play yet, because once again, in 2010's Peace Walker for the PSP, we'll be playing that when it comes back out in August, I believe.
August, yeah.
So, just like this game, you will have to appreciate and get the story of our podcast out of order in a completely different experience, just like as you are playing this game.
A bit we stole from the excellent podcast Codex Entries, which actually, Lauren, I think is a podcast you would like to listen to. It's about Dragon Age.
Yes, I absolutely do.
But they also play the games out of order.
They do play the games out of order. I actually love that podcast because I came into the Mass Effect series, it's not Dragon Age, on Mass Effect 3, and then proceeded to play 2 and then 1. And then I guess I started going forward by playing Andromeda, which is, the reboot. So it didn't really matter. But I do really like playing the games in a narrative where you're just slowly unfolding the shit that could have been different.
You're figuring out what actually, you see something in one of the later games and then you go back and play one of the earlier ones and you're like, oh, that was like fan service. I just thought it was dumb.
No, I actually was just I was loving the time. I didn't realize Mordin why he wanted these different things. I couldn't save him because I didn't really know what I was doing. I also didn't I was paragade. I made all of the wrong decisions. Tally died. Anyway, all of that being said.
Yeah, we can't talk about this now. That's next year. BioWare is next year.
BioWare is next year. So there we go, guys. Spoiler warning. We're already thinking about what we're going to do for next year. But this year for Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zero, so I just wanted to say that...
Notice how we are avoiding talking about it.
Yes, we're avoiding talking about it for a lot... For just for how deep, and I think how once you get into this game and you play it and you start enjoying the game, it's almost as if the more you play it and the more you learn about the game, also the more you're learning about the story. And we're going to start this discussion by talking about how we really appreciate that. I really felt like it was a very different Kojima game, however, somewhat very reminiscent of the original Metal Gear Solid. The original Metal Gear.
Yeah.
Uno.
Different.
Yeah. Uno. But also I want to just really, really, really call out that there will be a content warning. And then by that point, we will then start going into those gritty kind of details. And so if you are someone who wants to, if you want to avoid that for whatever reason, we understand the world is hard enough. You do not need to be listening to us delving into those issues if you're not ready for it. And if you will never, maybe you never will be, right? And I super respect that. And so because of that, we're going to have about the first kind of probably 25, 30 minutes here now all about Metal Gear Solid 5. It's going to be a normal Furudashi podcast. We'll still kind of lightly touch on some of the subjects that we thought were more than controversial. But then we will proceed to the second kind of, not like part of this podcast. And that's going to be probably around the 30-minute mark. Maybe a little bit.
But we will also let you know again.
But we are going to let you know when we get there. And we'll have a huge content warning. We're actually going to pause for a moment of silence for both of us. And then we will proceed. And so at that point, feel free to, exit the podcast. And you can find us, right, on all of the social media platforms. And you'll be able to discuss with us there. So with all that being said, Nicholas, please recap the games that I haven't played.
Well,
and all of the story.
Games that neither of us have played, in fact. So I have never played Peace Walker, and I've also never played Guns of the Patriots, which is Metal Gear Solid 4. I'm going to talk about those in the wrong order, in the spirit of doing things out of order, which is sort of like the nature of this episode. And the reason for that is because Peace Walker is more relevant to what we're going to be discussing today, since like it literally continues that story. Whereas with Guns of the Patriots, like chronologically, that game happens way, way in the future from when this game happens. So that's why I'm going to talk mostly about Peace Walker. So Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker is a game that came out in 2010 for the Sony PlayStation Portable. I myself owned a PSP. I did not ever play this game when it was released for PSP because I just wasn't really into the Metal Gear games. I think there were other Metal Gear games that were released for the PSP as well. There was like Metal Gear Acid or something like that, which is a completely different game. These are all these games that are like in the, I guess you could say, Metal Gear universe, but they weren't directed by Kojima, which is why we're not necessarily going to cover them. I just want to let you know that like that stuff is out there. And so like the PSP was a platform for particular Metal Gear games, but Peace Walker was the only one that was directed by Kojima himself. And it is also the one whose story leads directly into the events of Ground Zeroes. So a little bit about Peace Walker as a game. Like Ground Zeroes, it has a kind of overarching narrative, but it's structured as a series of missions. And that's very relevant for the game that we are going to be talking about today, because the mainline Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid games, they are not really mission structured games. They're not like your CODs, they're not like your Battlefields. They very much have like a continuous, more or less linear narrative. And I'll get into why I think the shift is important for Phantom Pain when we discuss that, but that'll be for future discussion. But anyway, the point is that we are now sort of, I guess you could say, fiddling with the structure of what a quote-unquote Metal Gear game is supposed to be under Kojima, because like I said, there were these other games that all have very different structures. Also in Peace Walker, you have the introduction of the like score screen that appears after you complete a particular mission segment, that, rates your performance based on, how quickly you did it, and various other performance metrics. You get like A, B, C, D, F. I think you also, an S. I think it's like the classic Japanese, like S, A, B, C, and then whatever comes after that. I never remember. The other important aspect of Peace Walker that we need to mention is this idea of sort of like soldiers captured for indoctrination. One of the things that you can do throughout Peace Walker to sort of like build up the mercenary group that Big Boss is creating is by capturing people and then through a kind of like interrogation / indoctrination is really the only word for it. Like get them to essentially like join your cause. And the reason why this is important is because the narrative of Ground Zeroes actually inverts this. Also, so like the last thing I think that's worth noting is something I've kind of already mentioned, which is that like so Ground Zeroes is structured as like a series of missions, but the first mission, the main one, directly bridges the story from the end of Peace Walker to the beginning of the Phantom Pain. And so even though this is kind of a shortish game, especially when it comes to sort of like that particular narrative element, I think Lauren described it to me as kind of being like playing a trailer for another game. But that's sort of like where it sits. It's meant to sort of like integrate Peace Walker into sort of like the larger mainline Metal Gear canon, because the other like non-mainline games aren't necessarily always considered canonical. So like there is a bit of work being done to say like, hey, this game that you might have thought of as non-canonical because it came out on the PSP, like all of these other games, it's actually like in the sort of like main lore, the main Kojima version lore of the Metal Gear universe.
And I think what's really comparable of a franchise when you think about this is that when you look at so there's two axes. So first, I'm going to talk about kind of like development, the history side, and compare kind of like the reason why it's really important to look at this as like canonical lore, right? For Kojima particularly as a director. And then I'll kind of talk about how Metal Gear Solid 5 has this, like when you start Ground Zero, you actually are going to get the story of Peace Walker if you click on the backstory tab. So the first part of it, though, is kind of building off of where Nicholas is trying to kind of frame this for us in a really like kind of holistic way, because a lot of times when you have a very popular franchise have spin-offs, like they're called spin-offs. Yeah. And so Metal Gear Solid 4 Peace Walker wasn't necessarily meant to be...
No, there's no 4 there. It's just Metal Gear Solid
It is Metal Gear Peace Walker. But
yeah.
I don't know. I say it's 4. Because this is 5, technically.
Well, but it's not in the 4 universe, because 4 is actually chronologically the last one.
It is. It's hard. So
which is annoying.
Okay, which is annoying. No, it's super annoying. So what I'm trying to say is when you have spin-off titles, whether or not there is a name, a number, a letter, whatever, is that I kind of compare it to any sort of spin-off that's usually for a different platform than the publishing platform that is associated with the main game title. Now, what do I mean by this?
Yeah.
What I mean is that a very popular series known as Persona, which is done by Atlas, usually has a partnership with Sony, which means it's going to be on a PlayStation, not on, say, like a computer. But there are a lot of really popular games that Sony, whether it was the PSP or you now have Nintendo Switch, sorry, Sony, they have Persona Q. And so Persona Q is using, I think, like the Persona 3 actors. No, 4. It doesn't matter. I don't remember, actually, because Persona Q2 has the Persona 5 actors and I think the Persona 3 actors as well. Okay. So like the characters. And this is important because Persona Q2, just like Persona 5 Strikers, those are totally different teams. They have the licensing, but they're still kind of very within the canon of the Persona 5 universe. But they are spin-offs. Like, they don't change the story of Persona 5. And then Persona 6 is going to be whatever, right?
Not to mention Persona is itself a spin-off of another game.
Yes, not to mention that. But it's become its own franchise now, Nicholas.
It has, yeah.
Yeah, and so I mentioned this because this is going into what I was talking to Nicholas about with the story of Peace Walker and also how this feels like a trailer. Because I, in my infinite wisdom for some reason, clicked on Backstory and watched all of that. Or / read all of that. You don't really watch it because you have to read it. I read all of it. And I read all of it because I knew that I would need it in order to understand and play the game. And I don't know why. Maybe it's just because the UI option was there. But when I read all of the backstory, by the time I finished the cutscene and instantly die when I enter the game, just so we're all clear.
Yeah.
It was like, I absolutely was like, this is a trailer for the game. And then I was like, no, you should play it, Lauren. Come on. And then I played it. And every time someone said something, when I overheard guards talking, when they were talking to me on the radio, I was like, I know how a Metal Gear game works. And I was like, but do I know how a Metal Gear game works? Like,
no, you don't actually, as it turns out.
Yes, no, I don't. So that's going to be exciting to talk about. But also, then I got to the end of the game, and let me tell you, like, I already knew I was going to be bad at it, but I was bad. It took me forever to actually just play that first main mission. Like, way too long is all I'm trying to say. It's not that big of a map. And I was like, this is a trailer. And it's done in a cinematic trailer way. It's done in a way that reduces and like obfuscates the lore and the history and the characters that are happening around you. Like, unless you really, really are into the Metal Gear lore, or you've played like Peace Walker or you've played the games, like I think entering into this title, you can enjoy it without having that knowledge, but also you won't have that knowledge going in. And so it will feel disjointed, and it will also feel like, what the hell did I just play? And then it even states to be continued in the Phantom Pain. Like, you will play this game now because you have bought this game, and buying this game is actually a trailer for this game. Because it does, like we're saying, it has to like set up so many things, so many variables, so much story. And I don't know, on the one hand, I really, really liked it. I liked the backstory tab. But on the other hand, I was just like, man, this is like a little pocket of a development cycle where someone's like, we need to make a game to explain the game I want to make. And I'm like, I'm sitting in the meeting room with Kojima and all of the producers being like, okay, you can make this game to explain the game you want to make. Like, can you imagine? That's what I'm imagining.
Okay, so to be fair to a guy who in the rest of the episode I really do not want to be fair to, he wanted to do something like this for Metal Gear Solid 2. So the prologue, when you play as Solid Snake at the beginning of Metal Gear Solid 2, because you play the rest of the game as Raiden, that was supposed to be something like what Ground Zeroes is. But for whatever reason, it didn't get released separately and then just became the prologue of the whole game. So the thing is, he has tried to do this before, and I don't necessarily know why he wanted to do that, but like, this is the realization of something that is sort of like been in his head for probably at least a decade.
Yeah, I definitely can see that as well. Like, I think for me, the biggest kind of thing that, for me, the biggest ideals and takeaways of the mission that I really felt for me, and we can like go into that main mission, were that it really was trying to kind of set up how Kojima wanted you to frame the experience. And then, quite frankly, it felt like for the rest of the missions, he absolutely left it alone. And that sounds really strange because they were all framed kind of very similarly. Yeah. And we kind of talked through every mission type. But I really do think that the storytelling and the systems of this game, and some of like the narrative elements that are being portrayed through the main mission were incredibly well executed. And it's just very dissatisfying digging deeper into some of that. Yeah. And I think that it's been very much, it's going to be really much of an understatement. And so, Nicholas, I would like to actually have you frame us in the, saving Chico and Paz, if you could call it saving, and what we did.
Yeah.
Right?
Because definitely go get them.
Definitely get them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are these two characters from Peace Walker who have been captured by the United States military, and they are being kept in a base that is not Guantanamo Bay, but might as well be Guantanamo Bay. I think it's called like Omega Base or something like that. Anyway, it's not. The point is, it's basically Guantanamo Bay. It's even in the same location in Cuba.
No, it's a pseudo historical retelling, pseudo history. Yeah. It says that, man. It's just
anyway. So like these two characters who had been part of the mercenary outfit that Big Boss / Snake, because he's still that sort of like dual character at this point, and he will be in Phantom Pain as well. He has decided to infiltrate by himself this U.S. military base, in part because it's kind of a shady thing that he's doing. He can't really get any sanction for it. And especially since he runs a mercenary outfit, the United States military is one of his primary clients. So he's actually kind of working against them in this regard because he wants to get his people back. And so these two characters, Chico and Paz, I want to emphasize, are teenagers. This will be important later. One of them, Chico, is being kept in a cage, kind of like outside in the rain. And the other is being kept in a cell that is sort of like by the boilers, if I remember correctly. I mean, spoilers for the game. If you need to find out where Paz is, she's by the boilers. One of them is a boy. Chico, Paz is a girl. And the way the mission is structured is you first go find Chico and you try to like get him to tell you what happened to Paz and where she is. Chico is fucked up for a whole number of reasons. He has both been like physically tortured, psychologically tortured. He may have been turned. It's unclear. He keeps listening to this cassette tape. Cassette tapes are also going to be important. And like generally speaking, Snake doesn't really get a ton of information out of him. So then sort of Miller comes on over the radio to be like, oh, well, you're going to have to go find Paz. You're going to have to go further into the base. And you do have to go further into the base. You have to avoid, it's a classic Metal Gear thing. Avoid the guards, sneak past them. I mean, you always have the option to kill them if you want, or trank them, or, use any of the various tools that a Metal Gear Solid game gives you to do that. And then you get to Paz. She's in the cell. You break her out, and then the sort of final third of the mission is you then need to exfiltrate. So you need to sort of like sneak with her, so like carrying her, because she basically can't. She's too weak to move, to a place where you can then sort of like light off a flare, which will be the signal for a helicopter to come and pick you up. And then sort of like that's the basic structure of the mission. So 3 parts. Find Chico and figure out where Paz is, find Paz, break her out, and then like get her out via the helicopter. And then all of this takes place within the context of this U.S. military base that is along the coastline of Cuba, because it's Guantanamo Bay, but not.
Yeah, and so here's like what's really been kind of like a struggle for me to help like articulate all of these thoughts that I have, is that I'm kind of going into this experience that Nicholas is saying, but like it's presented to you in a way that if you haven't played Peace Walker, you kind of actually get all the information you need to know right at the front. Like the dialogue was very like heavy-handed, and I immediately was like, okay, Paz, excuse me. I absolutely like.
You're the one who speaks Spanish. You should know how to pronounce her name.
I know how to pronounce her name. Like Paz. But Paz is there. They're like, hey, we really need to get this Paz lady because she may have turned into a spy. And I'm like, oh, we're picking her up not because we care about her, but because like we just want to make sure that she doesn't like turn on the enemy. And I was like, I hate that. And I'm like, what about this Chico guy? And they're like, Chico would never turn. And I'm like, oh boy, that feels like a setup. I was
trying not to spoil the end of Peace Walker, since we are eventually going to talk about it. She does the thing at the end of Peace Walker that makes her very sus.
Yeah, she's very sus. But also, if you play this game, because you are able to play it, and we will be talking about the narrative of Peace Walker. So step aside from that is that, yes, I went out of the way to do it. What I'm telling you is if you don't want to spoil a Peace Walker for yourself and you decide to play Metal Gear Ground Zero, you will be able to play it kind of without it. But you kind of realize going in, like, that's exactly what they're telling Snake. And I'm using this framework here because basically it creates a really great narrative structure for you to go in, and they're like, hey, don't forget, you can kind of chokehold and interrogate people. And he's telling you all of these mechanics, just like in every Metal Gear game, as soon as you go in. Like, don't forget, you can do this. Let's make sure you get your binoculars. Also, you can hold this and draw. Don't forget, you can roll around on the ground. And I was like, when am I ever going to use this? And I have to be honest with you, I still haven't used it. You can do this. You can do that. And so I wrap the mechanics and the narrative so cleanly, because I think in all of the Metal Gear games, there's always been a bit of a disconnect for me between Snake. You can do all of these really cool things. Remember, you have to pick up all the weapons while you're there. But in this game, they don't emphasize that at all. You come in with, honestly, I feel, just enough tools, right? And if you're very skilled, you probably don't have to pick up anything or get more ammo. / like the guys you take out will give you ammo. Like, and I kind of I do this a lot with the Metal Gear games, but particularly in this one, what I'm trying to say is that the narrative presentation of these elements were done in such a way and within line of all of my kind of, call person on the radio telling me how to play the game / also to get into game. And I'm talking kind of primarily about the main mission right now.
Yeah.
And also emphasizing that there is a mission select, but it's done in the traditional way of saying, like a Call of Duty. Like, this is Modern Warfare 1, you have to play the first mission. And you play a campaign. Well, not with Metal Gear. You're playing the main mission, and then it opens up multiple other missions that are kind of within the same linear timeline of the main mission. Like, that is how I experienced it. Now, I'm excited for Nicholas to kind of rebuttal and tell me, no, Lauren, these have no connection to each other whatsoever, or
it's
whatever
not that
you're
they have no connection. I mean, the thing is, like, each one is assigned a specific date. Like, they happen at a particular time. So, like, for example, the main Ground Zeroes mission, the one that's actually called Ground Zeroes, like, takes place in March, I think, in 1975. 1975 is kind of an important year, which we will discuss in the Patreon episode. So if you want that, you're going to have to head on over to patreon.com/Furidashi for not only that, but the rest of the Patreon episodes for the year of Metal Gear. And in addition to that, you can get our full back catalog of our excellent episodes in which we go into even greater depth and are even nerdier than we normally are on the free episodes. But if you want that, you're going to have to sign up for $5 a month because that's just what it costs. But you get so much for that. It's a steal. It's not even a bargain. You're stealing from us, and I'm going to let you because I love you guys so much. Now, back to the thing that I was saying after our little ad break. What's weird is that, like, there isn't, like, an explicit, like, clear narrative connection between all the sort of, like, the little lore bits that you get, because in many ways the missions kind of have a double focus. They both sort of expand your understanding of the particular world that this game and then also the Phantom Pain are in, but they're also doing something to kind of, like, tutorialize / introduce you to, like, specific mechanics that are relatively new to the Metal Gear Solid 5 games. And so because of that, it also means that a great deal, even as to, like, what you know about the main mission, the Ground Zeroes one, is itself coming to you. So Lauren kind of objected to me describing this as fragmented, and I don't even necessarily like that term, but you get these, like, bits. You get codex entries, like codex entries in many ways in the BioWare games, where you can kind of gather as much or as little of the lore as you want. Whereas, like, there's the stuff that Miller will tell you explicitly over the radio as you're playing. But if you want to sort of delve deeper into sort of, like, the underlying questions, and I'm going to call them questions, as to what's going on, then you can collect these cassette tapes and either, like, while you're doing the mission or later, because you can actually play the cassette tapes from, like, the main menu of the game. So the experience of, like, the lore this time is one in which you kind of, like, you can choose how much or how little of it you get, and it's definitely disconnected.
Okay.
And so, like, that structure is very different.
It is incredibly different. And yet, it feels a lot like Metal Gear Solo to me. Just the only one.
Yeah.
No, okay. So, like, that breakdown, right? And I love, thank you, that you said the lore of the cassette tapes, because now we get to talk about kind of,
okay,
like,
now it's Lauren, the Lauren corner?
No. Oh, it's the Lauren corner.
It is Lauren
yes and no.
corner.
It's actually the Lauren corner in that she does not think it's lore. Lauren actually thinks that is actually explicit information you need to understand the story of the full premise of the game. I think the narrative that players are experiencing, when I was talking to Nicholas earlier about this, I wanted to create something like not a term, but I wanted to create a way to kind of describe the fact that I felt the narrative of this game needed to be sought after by a curiosity, it's a curiosity-driven experience. You need to be able to go and ask those questions, like you mentioned. If you want your questions answered, you have to go out and seek the information. And seeking the information is done in an incredibly immersive way. You overlisten? My goodness. You eavesdrop.
Yeah,
to
over
eavesdrop.
Here is what you're looking for.
I know, I really like overlisten.
But that is an interesting kind of, like, portmanteau, overlisten. I like that.
You overlisten to the game. You know, you're not just hearing these guards talk, you are listening to those guards. Yeah. Okay, you gotta, but it's true. I think it's because what I wanted to say is you're an active listener, which makes you an active participant in the world's history and in the world's lore. And that's why I described this as a linear story, but it's told not just in a very or non-linear way, but it's told in a very open way where players also get to choose the missions that predate the mission that they played. In a way, they are playing the story backwards, the same way I played the Mass Effect games. And I think we're talking about Mass Effect a lot because, as we see in the show notes here, Mass Effect 3 actually came out when this game was in early development. And I'm going to let Nicholas talk about the nods to it. But just to end my point here and introduce more questions for you, is that a term that I use a lot on this podcast is ludonarrative harmony. And I think so many times people talk about a narrative of a Kojima game as being really high cinematically. Right?
Yeah.
You start the game, and it's true. If you just played the main mission of this game, you would get that classic Kojima experience, right?
Yeah.
And by classic, I mean actually new, because we saw in Metal Gear 1, blah, 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 blah. You've listened to the episodes, and if you haven't, go back and listen to them. But the cinematics, right, are like 11 out of 7 on our hex plot, okay?
Yeah.
Like they're shoved into your throat. You have no idea what's going on. There's a bunch of people. There's a skull face. You've got the classic things happening. And then at the end of it, you're like, did I just play 3 hours, and is that the game? With a bunch of question marks, right?
Yeah.
Classic Kojima. Classic movie. But
Yeah.
I think that fundamentally, the game is actually opposing that and breaking it down the more you play all of the other intelligence missions, particularly in classified intel acquisition. I really, really thought the ludonarrative harmony, or the marriage of the actual story with the narrative and the gameplay mechanics of those, were really kind of solid for me. My God, I hate this. Because
was the snake solid as well?
The snake was solid. The Metal Gear was solid. Because it was the way it ended up creating you can get off the truck at any time.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like I was there in the moment with someone. They also didn't explain how I got in the truck, but hey, I'm a super secret stealth solid snake agent, man. I can do whatever I want, right? And it felt like a part of the story. You created the searchlight and it was explicit, but then kind of all of your real narrative experience, and when I say narrative, I do mean the experience of the gameplay, not just the actual story. The story I only got if I kind of waited and I listened, or I zoomed in with my binoculars and I overheard people. And I think that's what's really, really, really different about this game, which even reminded me kind of the previous Metal Gear titles, like in the arcade games, because those were the ones that I'm playing the same map over and over again. And while that's still a linear story, this one, it was like, what if we did that, but with multiple mission selects, multiple mission stories? And the only way to get kind of like the full picture is to kind of almost relive these helicopter memories that are being presented to you, in scare quotes. But actually, even if you just do the base missions and you just stick to your target, you're actually not getting the full history of Snake. And I think that in of itself became a really great dialectical argument for Metal Gear, kind of in this weird milieu space that it operates under. Because it is in the center of who was Big Boss, who is Snake. That's kind of the argument of Peace Walker. We're not going to go into that. But then for this gear, and then when it sets up for Phantom Pain, it's kind of all about remembering who you were. And so I really liked that kind of narrative argument, and I would love to hear more kind of mission examples, or like more from what you think about that, Nicholas, because that for me was the takeaway of this kind of title.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm basically going to rephrase a bit of what you said. Lauren already said this, so this is not like, the guy stepping in and being like, well, now I say it, so it's very, very. But I want to sort of put a very specific term on this. It's almost like in the same way that you have to sort of like exfiltrate in this, American base time and time again throughout these missions. That is also a thing that, as Lauren was just saying, you have to do with the story, because the story is a thing that you have to extract in the same way that you would extract a prisoner. Or like in one mission, there is literally a guy whose character model is clearly Kojima.
Oh, yeah. No, I was like, we got to talk about the camp, right? Because
like he's got the same glasses, and it's like, okay, I see what you did there. I mean, his name is literally Hideo in the game, so it's like, okay.
No, it's he put himself in the game, guys. I just
but the thing is,
one day
like,
I want to do that.
But again, it's another one of these extraction missions. But like, even though each time you're doing like a kind of extraction, you're extracting like intel or prisoners or a particular person, like each mission approaches this a different way. So in the like Saving Kojima mission, it begins actually with you in a helicopter. And so like there's that idea like, oh, okay, Metal Gear Solid now has like vehicle combat because you're in a helicopter shooting, I believe it's a SAW, a 50 cal. Or I think you can also use like your regular weapons as well. You can use rocket launchers, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea that like, okay, there's going to be vehicle combat. There's also going to be combat against vehicles, which, to be honest, we have seen in other Metal Gear games. But it's sort of like, it's this interesting like dichotomy where it's like, okay, you begin in a vehicle and then you end against a vehicle to save this guy that you then travel to another vehicle, another helicopter in order to get him out. So there is a way in which Lauren is correct that the gameplay mechanics are trying to make you understand the way in which the narrative is being conveyed to you in much the same way. And so that's like, Lauren literally wrote an entire thesis on ludonarrative harmony. If you can find it, you should go read it. It's really good. But the point is that there's this idea.
It's actually not that good anymore. I've changed and grown a lot as a developer.
She is incorrect. It's brilliant. You never talk down your own work, even if it is shit. You always be like, no, I was the greatest. I'm a scholar. I'm awesome. Please invite me for a talk and pay me thousands of dollars for an honorarium is what you should actually say. Okay. And I'm very disappointed in you.
Okay,
anyway,
sorry.
Moving on.
I'm not the academic. Moving on.
So, but that's a really interesting point. So like we are seeing a marriage of narrative and gameplay. That's really what it is. And that's really sort of the virtue of this game. Shortly, we will be getting into
very shortly, actually. So, actually, to wrap all of that up, because I do think that, and I do appreciate. I mean, I always appreciate the love, Nicholas. What I would appreciate is that I think that there is a lot of, there's a lot of like virtues in the like specific gameplay and narrative, and I think there are a couple of highlights that I think I do just want to call out. Is that when you talked about destroy the anti-air emplacements, it's basically just saying now you are playing Halo.
You really are just kind of playing Halo. You're in the back of the Warthog or you're operating one of the cannons. Although I don't think Halo is the correct like touch point, even though Halo is to me like the one that immediately comes up. It's really Mass Effect 3 because Mass Effect 3 has a similar blend of this sort of like action cover, because Mass Effect 3 action cover shooter. You do occasionally have to like get behind big guns to kill things. To me, I was like, when I was recently replaying Mass Effect 3 because I was playing the Legendary Edition of all three games. And as I was playing Mass Effect 3 after having already played Ground Zeroes, I was like, oh, okay. I see what he did there. And the reason why this is important is because Kojima is definitely taking a lot of his cues in terms of like gameplay mechanics from other popular games. I don't necessarily know if he has ever copped to this, but like playing those games, especially like the fact that Mass Effect 3 came out as this game was in early development, I'm like, come on. Come on, guys.
Absolutely. It's about that cultural like milieu and inspiration transference, right? And that's why I really wanted to bring this up, is that kind of like to wrap up this portion of the episode, right? We always kind of talk about Metal Gear and we talk about Kojima as a director and the things that we felt in the past he's really innovative, or the things that he's done wrong. Or a lot of times on the internet you hear a bunch of people saying he's an incredible auteur, none of this ever existed before he did, he birthed it from his brain, baby. And I'm like, and then he made a game about babies, right? He obviously has an obsession, and we'll get to that later.
That's a very weird obsession with babies.
And I'm like...
But he eventually figures out how they're made. He eventually
figured it out how they were made, and then we will talk about that in Death Stranding. And so I think that what's really important to kind of reiterate here and to kind of like wrap this episode up with is that when we look at the Metal Gear franchise, right, we went all the way back to the super past. That sounded terrible. I'm so sorry. We went all the way back to its original inception, and then now coming to Ground Zero, you realize that there is a lot more cultural transference. There's a lot more inspirations into these titles, whether or not the developers who make them are telling you what those inspirations are. And so it was really nice to actually see this title specifically come together, because I do think that if we look at some of our hexplot metrics, that while the cinema in the original, the first mission is what I should say, was just incredibly like gosh awful high, all of the other missions had 0. And I think that was intentionally done because it makes you want to replay that main mission now that you have some more of the story. and some more of the context having played the previous titles.
Yeah,
and so
there are incentives for that as well, because like if you play the other missions and if you play the Ground Zeroes mission and get like a particular score, you do unlock other things that you can do in that mission. So the replayability is definitely, I think, a conscious thing that's going on.
And not only is the replayability like a conscious choice, but I also think that the amount of the thematic element of remembering, because all of those missions are backdated. For me, the theme of remembering and the themes of just the actual betrayal / kind of confusion is what I will say. If you've never played Peace Walker / it's confusing in general what happens at the end of Metal Gear, at the end of the main mission.
In any Metal Gear game.
In any Metal Gear game, really. But in this one, it's very confusing. Is that I would say that like the camp, there are some goofy missions that I actually did not unlock. I did not get through all of the other missions. I still had the like question marks, and now I get to see that they are beautiful. Déjà vu, jamais vu. But they're very
jamais vu, never again. Never. Actually, sorry, never seen. Never seen before. So see, also those are very memory. Seen again. Déjà vu. Seen again. Yeah.
And then jamais vu is never again, like seen never again.
No, jamais vu, never seen.
Never seen. Vu is seen. Have seen. Got it. Yeah. Lauren also learns French in this episode. I think that really quickly, just learning at our Hexplot chart, like I actually want for everyone to recognize that the cinema is relatively low. It's probably like mid. If anything, it's even lower than mid because there aren't cinematics for every single mission. Yeah. I don't actually think this game, while it has a lot of combat and you can use combat all throughout, I actually think the more you use combat, because I did, your score is lower. I think that is an excellent way to de-incentivize combat and have the focus on stealth. So my combat score is going to be pretty low mid. There is really no camp in this, and there can't be because the theme of trauma and the theme of tragedy and some of the shit that we're about to talk about is very, very high.
It isn't. Like the Kojima include is a bit campy.
It's a bit campy, but it's not super low. It's not a 0, but it's not a 7. Like we definitely have seen 7.
A 1.5. I'll get up a 1.5.
Yeah, 1.5. And then for the lore aspect, I think this game, a lot of people would say that this game is all lore. This game is all collectibles. But I actually disagree with the term lore here for that, because I think so much of the story and the narrative experience is about, like we talked about, extracting the knowledge from the world.
Exactly.
You wouldn't consider that lore, I think, as a player. I think as a player, you'd be like, no, that's the story. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And then for the next 2 hex plots, we're not going to break. And I am going to talk about misogyny and psychodrama will now be in the remainder of this episode. And while we've been trying to keep these episodes to a nice 45 minutes, I've actually set our timer an extra 5 for myself, which means we'll have about 10 minutes to kind of discuss this. And truthfully, we are keeping it to the 10-minute mark for everyone's sake, because, the world is hard and we cannot ignore these issues, but we also need to recognize that these issues are incredibly are sensitive and should be dealt with that. And so without further warning, we wanted to thank you all for listening up to this point. We will be taking a moment of silence, for this is the content warning we promised you at the beginning of the episode.
So, should we deal with the giant elephant in the room? So we spoke really positively about the way in which, like, you have to seek after the information in this game. You have to seek after secrets, like, the collecting the tapes, overhearing conversations. So, and we were like, yeah, that's really interesting how the gameplay. Okay, so what if you actually do that?
Yeah, what if you actually play this game and you're like, man, I'm like invested and I'm a woman and, sorry.
Or just a decent human being. Yeah, honestly, especially if you're a woman, but also just like, okay.
But a decent human being, or let me rephrase this, or you identify with the women's plight, which is just any gender, okay?
So what has happened to Paz? Lauren, do you want me to try and tackle what has happened to Paz?
I would actually really appreciate if you would tackle what happens to Paz. And I really appreciate that. Yeah. I could definitely talk about it, and I feel like I might be a little more haphazard because of the boiling rage inside of me, which may do Pause actually a disservice. That's the only thing. And I think that you're much more academic than I am, and I am much more aggressico. And so I think this is a really great balance. You can tell that I am attempting to hold.
Yeah, but
peace.
Lauren knows how mad this game made me when I played it.
This game makes Nicholas infuriating. And so actually that's what I'll do. I will start and Nicholas will actually elaborate. And I think maybe that's what we'll do. Okay. I think because Nicholas is incredibly infuriated. You can't see his face. Whew, you can hear my voice though. That's also infuriating. So let's talk about Pause in terms of the characterization. So when you first come into this experience, I actually don't know who she is. And I did happen to kind of watch/read the backstory. And let's just say when you start the game, it does say explicitly in dialogue that, hey, like, Pause may have been a turncoat, and Big Boss, or Snake, kind of defends her. And he's like, well, we're not sure of that. And I was like, this is great. We've got two people already bantering about a woman, and we don't know. When you save Chico, he gives you this tape, and it basically has Pause kind of like, or it's his tape of him kind of being extracted or removed from where Pause is currently located, because she's being kind of dragged, I guess, to a cage, and they're being separated. And Chico and Pause are kind of like, let's call them friends. And so these two teenagers are separated, and then you have to listen to the tape, and you kind of find Pause's location. At this point, you hear Pause kind of somewhat screaming in the background, but you're not sure why. And I'm like, maybe she's being tortured. Like, that makes sense because, this honestly, like, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to get tortured.
She is being tortured.
And she is being tortured.
That's true.
It is true. And I'm doing this through the main mission because when you try now, when you play the game, you also have Pause's diary. You have all of Pause's notes in the cassette tapes. So you're actually given all this information about Pause, and you can read and listen to all of that. And it really just kind of shows that she, it has spoilers, I guess, for Peace Walker, so I won't say them on air. But point blank, you get to Pause. And the things that I loved about the game are when you pick up the prisoners of war, when you pick up enemy guards, you pick up the people you're supposed to rescue, they start talking to you and telling you about, these are the horrors of the world. Langley doesn't know what's going on. This isn't, the U.S. isn't involved in Guantanamo. This is all
Langley
like off the books. I mean, Langley does know what's going on, but like, let's be real. Like, this is in the game world, okay?
Yeah.
And she just keeps going like, my stomach. It's okay if you hit me. Like, pain is, an illusion. And I was just like, oh my God, this is horrible, because of course it's coming out of a woman. Like, Chico was also in fucking pain, and he had nails in his like ankles, but he was just like, oh, where are you taking me? I'm like so mean. And then you have this girl just being like, ha 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 ha. She's laughing. And I'm telling you this in the main mission context because I was already upset in the main mission, and I know something's wrong with her stomach, and I don't know why. And I'm like, oh God, I know what's happening. I know what's going to happen. And then we know what happens, right? And then for spoiler warning, right? This is content warning. Not only is there a bomb in her belly, but like there also then becomes like a man's fist just in her belly. She would have died 5,000 times at this point. And that's when I'm like, there's this, whatever has happened to her, that's how much torture has happened. It's just excruciating. And I can only talk about the main mission because, and I say only, because that is all I want to talk about. Because this is now in a cinematic, okay? You're getting the visuals.
Because you're on the helicopter.
You're on the helicopter. You're getting the visuals, okay? And there's something, at least you can see it. You can turn away from visuals, okay? The human imagination, when stimulated with a visual thing, if this is what the people that are rescuing her are doing to her, I was like, man, I can only imagine what the people who didn't really give a fuck about her are doing. Well, Nicholas played more of this game than I did, and he did not have to imagine.
So I did the thing that Lauren says is the really beautiful thing about this game, which is you go in and you collect all of the information.
And I say beautiful because it's a very interesting way of doing the mechanics. So we're clear, right? It's not beautiful inherently.
Not content-wise. Yeah,
not content-wise. The mechanic is, it's a very well-executed system and game design. Continue. Okay, just so we're clear.
So, okay. If you listen to all of the tapes that you can collect, one of the things that becomes clear is that as a kind of way to interrogate Chico into revealing the location of the base where Big Boss and his mercenaries are all holed up. It's called Mother Base, which we will see again in Phantom Pain. Okay. Paz is sexually assaulted. She's raped by Skullface, who's the guy who's the head of XOF, this other mercenary outfit, basically as a way to compel Chico to talk. Is this handled well in the game? The answer to that question is no, it is not handled well, because you can literally hear her as she is being raped on the tape, which is almost worse in many ways than seeing.
It is worse.
I don't know if it's worse or not, but
no,
it's horrible.
It's so
really
worse.
Fucking horrible.
It's so worse because, and I will tell you all the reasons why it's worse. But for just so everyone understand, I did not listen to this tape. Like, it almost made me want to stop playing the mechanic that I just said was really good. And that's why I was like, hey guys, there's going to be a content warning if you want to play this game because gameplay is fun to you. Blah, 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 blah. I'm glad for all of you that are still listening because it's just infuriating. Like, we put down the controller. I almost was like, well, now I'm really scared when I pick up this tape. Like, I'm scared now. What tape am I going to get? And if I was in your shoes, Nicholas, and you'd been playing this game, you pick up this tape, you listen to it. Now it's like, I don't know if I could go to the game after that.
I didn't even know what I was listening to at first, and then I like thought about it for a second. Oh, and then to make it even fucking worse. So Chico blabs, obviously, because that's a horrible thing to go through. But then like Paz comes over to him afterwards, and she like comes on to him immediately after being sexually assaulted. And I'm like, what the fuck is this for? And it made me think back to all those times in which in previous episodes we've talked about the misogyny in these games in a kind of almost tongue-in-cheek way. It's like, oh, haha, he's talking about boobies. He's like, yeah, Solid Snake is a bit of a lech. But like, this is just so profoundly fucked. And it reminded me of the fact that, like, you know, this has kind of been Kojima's MO in a couple of the games that we're not talking about because they're not Metal Gear games. So, like, for example, in Police Knots, one of the things that you can do as you're, like, interrogating these various, like, secretaries throughout the game is, since it's like a point-and-click game, you can literally, like, grope them. And they'll go, like, when you do it. And in fact, it was so egregious that when Police Knots was remastered for release on, I think it was the PlayStation 1, Konami actually like demanded that Kojima tone it down. And Kojima fought them on it, but he eventually relented. And the fact that he fought them on it, I was like, a similar situation where it's like, what the fuck is the point of that? Like, you're just being gross to be gross.
Yeah. It is insane to me as a developer and as anyone. Just it's insane to me as a human. It's insane to me as a human. Sorry. I was trying to like be nice and now I'm just like, fuck that. It is insane to me as a human that the same man that can create a bisexual, beautiful queer character that is just unapologetic. And in the last episode we did, when we were talking about Metal Gear, we had potential lesbian romance that, yes, it came after the fact, and it was a little bit strange and, like, out of nowhere. But it makes you rethink, literally, these types of characters, these types of situations, and these kind of strong, powerful women that are like, are you building up this lady just to, you know...
Just basically to be a sexual object. And the thing is, like, Ava was clearly a sexual object in Snake Eaters. Even though she was an interesting character, like I will admit that I think Ava is actually a really cool character, but she's a really interesting character in like the James Bond sense.
Yes,
where like she is both like a meat market figure as well as. Oh my
god, I love that you just said meat market, but we can also say femme fatale. But no, and I say this because I love the femme fatale characters in the James Bond movies. I love that it's, you know, women as a way to use, you could say, right, what, you know, men in like the 1950 hard-boiled noir detectives are like, oh, she's using her wiles, right, against men because she knows that that's the way to get to them. And I think there is, as a woman, you read that, through this kind of lens of like, that is a way of the man kind of identifying, controlling. But there are better portrayals in the Bond films, and the better, like, there is a better wrapper to that. Of it's like, we look at it and we know that it's like, in some ways, yes, like, that's true. Like, there is a truth to that, but like, there's an empowerment of it, right? It's kind of reclaiming sexuality versus just like, no, my sexuality is for men, so now I have to be drab and dress like a nun. Like, this is what I'm trying to get at, right? Like, a woman can be sexy, powerful, intelligent, smart, awesome, and she can dress like, you know, in a bodysuit, or she can dress like in super awesome, like oversized, like cardigans and sweaters and like cute, like fuzzy teddy bear hoodies like I wear. You know, we can all be multitudes. And that gets taken from you when shit like this happens in a game where you have someone that is incredibly awesome or is a double agent. And you also see him use tropes like the woman is a double agent from Eva, from Paz, from Big Boss. It's a recurring motif. And that's recurring motif is fine. Like, and what I'm saying is, like, if it ends there, does that make sense? You know, like, I acknowledge that the motif exists, and I hate that it exists, and I wish that you would say something different about it instead of whatever the fuck this was. You know, like, I did want different, but not this, not this, not. Does that make like? I don't know.
And to me, it speaks to the way in which like sexual violence is treated very casually in media.
So casually in media, and it's not just gross. Sexual violence.
It's fucking gross.
It's sexual violence towards women specifically, and that is why. Oh, this content warning existed, but it is also why I felt like this was a different part of our episode, because it is just the absolute amount of misogyny. When we started this series, we were like, it's misogyny, dudes rock. Like, it's a product of the times. We never actually said that, but like, I'll filter this off. Welcome to a preview of what it is like on our Patreon episodes. Okay.
Well, and the other thing is like, it's going to, for me, it definitely reflects on, like, say, you know, because I used to have a kind of mixed, ambivalent feeling about, say, like the sexualization of quiet in fandom.
Yes.
But this puts a completely different spin on that, where it's like, oh, despite the fact that like Kojima himself tried to claim that like, oh no, actually she, you know, you're going to feel bad when you just think that she's eye candy when you find out like why she has to be barely clothed the entire time. Spoilers, it's a stupid reason. But the thing is like, I was still kind of willing to forgive that, because it's that sort of lechy, okay. She's a hot girl. But like this fucked with me so hard, where I'm like, no, you can't just giggle at it and be like, oh yeah, he's a bit of a lech. Like, because a bit of a lech also can be this.
No, yeah, and that's, okay, so just so we're clear, I never actually, like, I can be a critic, right? I can be critical. I can, like, have that, like, academic objective bias, but I was never, like, forgiving. I was like, it's like when Devil May Cry has the character named Lady, and now we've got Quiet, and now we've got Fragile, you know? And what's next? Broken? Sorry. Not sorry.
Soft. Soft will be the next major Kojima female character. Soft.
Yeah, I never forgave, right? But what as any developer who's like a fan of playing these like games, or is also just wanting to play these games to learn, there were just things that are unacceptable, and this is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Not only is it not handled well, I do want to make sure that we wrap up this episode at the 60-minute kind of mark, or at least a little bit before, because this is going to be a longer episode for all these reasons. But it's not only unacceptable, but the reason why I think it is particularly atrocious in an audio-only format is that when you think about writing this to the screen, putting it on a cinematic in front of a player, there are so many ways that you can obfuscate that. You can cut to Chico. You can see an expression on his face. You can hear a screen, but not really hear what's going on, because the brain will focus on a visual receptor. But when I talked about how the human imagination is more powerful than, right, what is going on screen, is that it really recontextualizes not just the fact that Paz now has been stuffed with a bomb after all of this, and maybe had a second bomb somewhere in her and who knows where, and also that Kojima has no idea about the female anatomy, and that's also unacceptable at this point in 2014. But also that her sacrifice, question mark, at the end, like, makes it even feels worse that it's like all there to service like Solid Snake / the people on the helicopter. And it's that women as a service provider that is just
well, yeah, it's the classic feminist critique of like women existing for men.
It is exactly that. And I think that his misogyny, like we have always talked about this in the games where the women were there just to prop up Snake, and I was like, well, there are just different ways that have been executed, that in this title it was as if all reins went bye-bye, you know, like anyone else speaking up about it went bye-bye, and now it was just you can do whatever you want, like it is all in service of Solid Snake, dude bro military, but actually anti-US. And I think that's what I kind of want to I think we should just kind of put a bow on that. Because I think that, like, for me, I was like, hey, the psychodrama and the misogyny of our hex plot. So for those of you who really are still, like, kind of into it, and you're like, Lauren, we get it. No, you don't get it, because I think the misogyny / what was considered deuterodox, at this point, like, it needs to be considered, like, we just need to relabel it, like, feminism, or relabel it just complete misogyny.
Just misogyny.
Like, just misogyny. Because it's not something that's kind of, like, done in a humorous way, and then we kind of moved on from it, or we wouldn't see it again. It's something that is persistent, and then was built off of, and in such a way in this game, crystallized as an oddity, like an
and got worse.
And got worse. It got worse. So for me, yes, we have been traditionally using the hexplot to talk about our experience as a player, and that our experience as players is through the eyes of Snake. Well, for this episode, I'm going fuck that shit, because psychodrama for me is now me as a player, and also as me identifying with the characters in the games, but particularly through that female lens, because of all of the ways in which this game also highlights Snake, your facial expressions are getting better in this game, and there's so many weird Easter eggs, and they talk about all of the improvements in technology, and in the end, they decided to do this. So for me, yes, psychodrama is fucking huge, and I don't think it's because Snake has any psychodrama in this whatsoever. It's all the side characters. So with that, thank you, Kojima, I guess, for giving us a great example of how to do really deep, terrible, horrible storytelling, and all of that. So, Nicholas, is there anything you'd like to add to the end of this episode? Or
I don't want to add anything substantive, because I think you having the last word is more appropriate. I want to remind everyone that you can follow us on Blue Sky. So Lauren is at Espresso Cat. I am at Academicality. Again, you can go around to our Patreon, where you can find not only the bonus episodes from previous months, but also the bonus episode for this one, in which we will be discussing a little bit more of sort of the setting and historical background for Metal Gear Solid 5. Substantively, the only thing I want to add is thank you, if you did stay with us, for staying with us.
Yes, thank you.
Take care of yourself, and we'll see you again.